Okay, so today's topic, obsession and its masks, it goes a little deeper than other lectures that we have done in terms of spiritual influence and obsession, but not as deep as the book where we took the study from. The book goes in depth about actually the neurophysiology of obsession, which I won't really occupy your minds with. I'm bringing 5 different cases from 5 different books of Andrew Lewis that talks about obsession, which is a very complex process actually. It can happen at many different levels. And the goal is just to illustrate the process in the different ways that it can happen, and hopefully make you curious to go to these books and to learn a little bit more about it. It's also not meant to scare anyone, but what we're going to see is that we are immersed in an ocean of thoughts, and we are all interconnected, and we all influence each other at all times, and there's nothing abnormal about the things that we are going to share today. And before talking about it, because we have a very mixed public in terms of knowledge of spiritism and understanding, we'll do a little review of some basic principles that will help us to understand obsession per se. And so let's talk a little bit about the mechanism first. So we are all immersed in what Andrew Lewis calls the divine plasma. So this is the most primitive energy that is everywhere in the universe, and that is the energy, and we call it energy because we wouldn't have another term, but it is matter. It is a very, very subtle type of energy that actually is the energy that God in its will manipulates to create things, with the exception of the spirit, because the spirit is immaterial. So the spirit is created by some other source unknown to us. But everything else that is material, that's matter, is created from this divine plasma. And the higher spirits in the higher spheres, they also do the same thing. They create by their thoughts, by their will, and in the spiritual realm, that's how things are created. Our thoughts have the same role of our hands. Here we use our hands to manipulate things. The spirits will use their thoughts to manipulate the energy, the ether, the plasma, whatever you want to call that, to construct in higher spheres the divine homes, the planets, the things that we see in the universe. They're temporary. They come to an end. Now, we are also co-creators in a much, 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 much lower plane. So we think that's exactly the same process that the angels use to construct their beautiful works. We do too. On a daily basis, we are constantly thinking, and as we think, we are creating. So when we read in the works of Andrew Lewis about the lower zones, for example, what are the lower zones, if not temporary creations of the human mind? When what you experience within yourself is darkness, horror, guilt, trouble, afflictions, that's the mental creation that you are projecting. So the lower zones that we hear, and like, do they really exist? Do you feel yourself in the lower zone sometimes? Yes? Yeah. Then they do exist, because it's just an outside reflection of your inner world where you are momentarily. But we are momentarily in lower zones. Sometimes we are in medium zones. Once in a while, got a peak of what seems to be a little bit of a higher zone, right? And so the thing about the lower zone, as it is true for anything that's dark, is temporary, it's transient, and it's not real. Because the reality of human beings is light. So once we come to a place that we manifest this light, all that is lower and all that is dark will disappear, and light will prevail forever, okay? But so we are the ones who, with our thoughts, so you have a whole bunch of spirits there are at the same wavelength, they are vibrating the same way, and it's the association of their thoughts and their energy that constructs those zones of darkness and suffering. Not created by God, created by us, created by the human mind. So, Andrew Lewis, I like this statement, so I put it over here. It says, the energy is a divine force that we make use of to add to the divine purpose, our own purpose. So, the universe is the manifestation of God's purpose, and superimposed to God's purpose is our own purpose, our own creations. The laws of creation will honor all living creation executed by the human mind, and will constrain each soul to convert every harm done into the good that should be done, because love is the eternal principle that reigns in the entire universe. So we are free to create, and every time that we create anything that is loving, the universe will honor that creation. But every time we create something that's harmful and brings disharmony, then the laws of the universe will constrain us and will educate us in such a way that we must change that. Because love, as it says, is the eternal principle. So we are destined to vibrate love and to be in harmony with the love that is extensively available to us outside. All right, so the other concept is the concept of mental matter. So here again, with Andrew Lewis, we learned that to think is to create, and every creation has movement in life. And I have said that many times here, and as I was preparing this lecture, I'm always like more conscious and more aware as I read and study about thinking and thought creation of my own thoughts. And I'm always increasingly concerned about my own thoughts, and sometimes puzzled by how can I change my thoughts? How can I break this pattern of, unhealthy thinking that sometimes I identify within myself? We're going to talk more about that. But so, it's always important to remember that we're thinking, we're creating, our thoughts have movement in life, and with that, there is a responsibility for what we are creating. So not only are we responsible for what we are doing, but we're responsible for what we are thinking. And sometimes we say, oh, I'm just thinking, nobody knows what I'm thinking. Not true. Everybody knows what you're actually thinking at some level. The universe is registering every single thought that we have. And then beyond that, we come to another important principle, which is the principle of exchange. Life and movement are linked to the principles of exchange. So not only we think, we create, but we exchange with other minds, okay? So it's imperative to observe what we are giving in order to understand what we're receiving. A lot of people talk in the sense, oh, I'm receiving all these bad energies. But Spiritism invites you to think about what is it that you're giving. Because it's always a law of exchange. So we are receiving according to what we're giving. So if our life is surrounded by negativity, what is it that we're putting out there? And if you want to change that, following this principle, it's important that we change what we are projecting, what we are giving, right? And that takes us to the next principle, which is the principle of reciprocal influence. So not only we think, we create, we exchange, but now we are influencing one another. Okay, so I'm going to skip those two, and move forward. Okay, now this is another concept, the concept of mental induction. And it looks very complicated, but actually I'm going to make it very simple. So what happens is, so you think, you create, you throw that thought out there. Actually, by affinity, by vibratory affinity, that thought is going to meet with other thoughts in the same wavelength. They superimpose to one another. Now, if that thought had, let's say, a power of 5 out of 10, met someone else's thought in the same vibratory level, those thoughts are superimposed and combined. Now, they're more powerful. They're 10 out of 10. And they come back to me. So I threw out something with some strength and it comes back to me stronger. So if I had a thought, oh, what a beautiful day, I'm so grateful for this day, I just want to help somebody today and make somebody happier, then it's going to find other thoughts out there who are vibrating at that same level. It's going to come back to me, and suddenly I'm going to take by this great enthusiasm. So I'm being fed by my own thoughts coming back to me stronger. That's another important principle, okay? We're going to take all that to the obsession, but it's important to understand that. Now, usually, how does our body work? So I'm going to take a very simple example, and this is from Luis Lima's lecture in the 7th Florida Spiritual Seminar that actually is going to happen in Port St. Lucie, coming up now in August, and I asked him to take some of his slides. It's a whole seminar on mediumship. Outstanding, really, really good, and this is just a little piece of his lecture. But so usually, how do we work? Take the eye, right? So the eye is equipped to receive light, okay? So once it receives these stimuli from outside, then you have the optic nerve. So this stimuli that's coming from the outside turns into an electric impulse that the nerve is going to take all the way to this region in the brain called thalamus. The thalamus is an interesting structure because what it does, it receives everything that's sensorial. So the light from outside, the sound, when I touch something and I feel this is cold, all this information goes to the thalamus. The thalamus organizes everything. And what the thalamus does through synapses and different neurons, send the information to the cortex. The cortex is where you have all the bodies of the neurons, the nerve cells. And then in this case here, it goes to the occipital lobe, the back part here, where this part of the brain is going to say, well, this is what you see. It's going to interpret the information. This is how usually things work when we're receiving outside information. Now, in the brain, right, we have this tiny little gland that has many different functions, but one of these functions is the gland, as Andrea Lewis talks, of mental life. One of the most important physical expressions of the coronary chakra found on the diencephalon. Don't worry about the diencephalon, but it is the gland of mediumship. We're talking about obsession. So obsession is when you receive the influence of the spirits, right? It's a negative influence. So it is to the process of mediumship. Now, how this gland works, this gland has within the gland something called crystals. Each one of us has crystals. So each one of us are able to receive influences. We receive influences from the spirits all the time. Some of us have many more of those crystals, and those are the people who are the mediums who more ostensibly will deal with the phenomena of mediumship. So what happens is when the spirit sends a message to us, it's captured by this gland. The more crystals you have, the energy comes in, hit one crystal, rebounds to another crystal, rebounds to another crystal. The more crystals you have, the longer this energy is going to be rebounding within the pineal gland, which means there is more time to absorb the message and more time for the message to stay in your brain. And then from there, this message, which is electric, can go to two different places. Can go to the cortex, where it's going to be interpreted as an idea, or it can go to your hypothalamus, where it's going to be transformed into a sensation. So I used to say a while back when I was sitting on the chair that I would close my eyes to do a prayer, I would shiver, right? And my hair would go up. That would be an example of, so if a spirit is close to you and your pineal gland is capturing that influence, that energy, that message, you may have a physical sensation. You feel your hair going up. And that's because your pineal gland captured that, and that was sent to a specific part of our brain that turned that into a biochemical reaction, and you had a physiological response. But other times the information is sent to the cortex, where it's going to be interpreted into a full idea. So what happens with mediumship is this. All these first steps here are out. The medium has his eyes closed. So he's not getting any information through his eyes, right? But the spirit is sending the information, which is absorbed by your chakra. And then from the chakra, it goes to this physical receptor, which is the pineal gland. And from here, it goes straight to the cortex. So all the physiological, sensorial mechanism is gone. You are receiving the information through a completely different mechanism, okay? So this is, in a very simplified way, how mediumship works. So the brain has resources through its sophisticated organic and spiritual neuropsychic net to emit and to receive information, just like a TV or a radio station. Okay, so with that in mind, let's get into the obsession part. So we have, Emmanuel tells us that we have about 20 billion of discarnate souls, okay, around us, right? In this realm, in this planet, right, linked to our planet, we have about 20 billion of discarnate souls. Now, we know that the majority of the souls that are linked to this planet are not enlightened souls, right? So you have all these souls and all these minds like gravitating around us. And so we are, all of us, subject to obsession. What is obsession? Obsession is we're under the influence all the time of the spirits. Everything is connected. We all connected. And we're receiving their inspiration, their thoughts. But sometimes each one of us will experience at some point of our lives a negative influence. That's not only a thought, but it's something that's going to persist for a little bit with us. Okay? That's obsession. Now, it can be simple, which is just an influence that lasts for a little while. Then you're able to change your mental position and you're able to get rid of that influence. Sometimes it's deeper, and then people become like fascinated, meaning they believe in something so deeply that no matter how many people tell them that that makes no sense, they believe that that makes sense. And they truly believe that. And so they enter in a world of illusion. And that can be a very serious obsessive process. And then subjugation. Subjugation is when it goes even deeper, and then the person really loses control of his or her mind. And so some of the many people we see in psychiatric hospitals, not that they don't have a physical disease, and not that it cannot only be a physical process, but more often than not, there is a very complicated spiritual process together with the physiological process. Okay, now the classification that I just shared with you was given by Allan Kardec in the Medium's book. Now, Marlene Nobre, who is the president of the Spiritist Medical Association in Brazil, she did an analysis of obsessions using some of the examples of the books of Andrew Lewis, and she divided the obsessions in different categories, which are the categories that we have over there. But we're going to talk just about the first three ones, with symbiosis, fluidic infections, and mental fixation. All right, so talk about spiritual symbiosis. I mean, it may sound like, wow, does that really exist? But symbiosis is a phenomenon that's present in entire nature. And we, in our relationships, we do have symbiotic relationships. And symbiosis is not necessarily something bad. It can be good or can be bad. It can be good where one person is supporting the other, and it can be bad to the point that one participant can actually kill the other. So one example of symbiosis in nature is this relationship between the clownfish And sea anemone, is that how you pronounce it? Anemone? Yeah? Say it? Anemone. Okay. So, so this is the relationship, right? The fish eats these invertebrates that can potentially harm the anemone. Anemone. Okay. So then, after the fish eats these little animals, the fecal matter of the clownfish actually feeds the. You guys say it every single time. All right. But the anemone has also these stinging cells that are very harmful, but they do not harm the fish. They protect the fish. So there is a relationship where one is assisting the other, right? One is helping the other. This relationship is present everywhere in nature and with humans as well. So it's nothing outside of the ordinary. So between humans, it exists since we started thinking, since we became individualized spirits, characterized by our ability to think, to synthesize thought, and to manipulate the matter of the universe. These symbioses start to happen in our life. So here's what Andrew Lewis says, that the incarnate surrenders unconsciously to the discarnate that takes over the control of the incarnate's existence, suffering temporarily the influence and the control of the spirit in exchange for protection against influences even more deplorable. Many discarnate, unaware or traumatized, weak or unsure, share the experience with the incarnates, partially absorbing their vitality. Okay, so how do we understand that? Okay, so we do have spirits that are going to attach to incarnate ones in symbiotic processes. Now, we're going to look at a few cases. These, like I said, it can happen at various different degrees, okay? So one very simple way that it happens is many people who pass away and now are in the spiritual realm, they are very, very attached to their families. And they are very attached to material life, to the sensations of material life. They don't mean bad. They mean no harm. But they just continue to live in the homes with the families. They sit on the table with the family. And Andrea Luiz is going to talk about how they will absorb the smell of the food. And Andrea Luiz asks, but are they really eating? And the instructor said, do you realize that 70% of our nourishment comes from breathing? Our nourishment comes from breathing, from what we are inhaling. And so as they inhale the smell of the food, they feel the taste of the food. It is as if they are eating the food. So the case is the case of Esther. As they enter the house, Andrew Lewis and the mentors, he says the poor widow's house was located on a modest street. And although relatively comfortable, it seemed to be inhabited by many spirits of inferior nature. The reason why is because this lady had no really connection with any spirituality, and the house was open, completely open for any influences. The family made up of the widow, 3 children, and an elderly couple sat around the dinner table in front of a very simple lunch. 6 spirits, enveloped in shadow, joined them at the meal as if they were taking in nourishment by absorption. So Andrew Lewis has the impulse of talking to the spirits, and he said, you know, how unpleasant to be eating and having all these spirits eating with the family. And the instructor said, but you know, have you realized that they are not foreign spirits? They are known to the family. They are familiar to the family. So they are together because the family is keeping a level of conversation and vibration, and they are attracting those family spirits. And the spirits are very attached to their family. They don't have a conception of life going on and all the possibilities for them out there. Also, there is, like I said, no protection. So what do we take from here? The importance on our end of incarnates. Table is a very sacred place when you sit with your family to eat. Actually, as everywhere, we should watch what we are saying. We should watch what we're thinking. So we're going to sit at the table and curse at each other. We're going to sit at the table and criticize people. We're going to sit at the table and gossip. We should sit at the table and be talking to each other about the good things that we have done, about positive things that we can do. And so that the time that we're eating is a time where the energies are good energies. So we're all absorbing good energies. Andrea Lewis wants to make himself seen to those spirits and talk to them, and the instructor said, no, there's no point, because they're so crystallizing where they are that if you show up and try to talk to them, you're not going to get anywhere right now at this point. Sometimes it's important to wait for people to be ready to listen to what we have to say. So this is a pretty harmless case. In the realms of mediumship, case Liborio. Now this is an interesting case. Liborio is a spirit, so he's discarnated, right? And he's attached, he's obsessing this woman, which actually a woman that he loved passionately while he was alive. Now, he's a spirit who was very, very lost in life. Don't have enough time to go into the details, but he passed away in a very, very complicated situation. He did a lot of harm, just so we can know where he's coming from. So after he left his garment of flesh, with his thoughts fixed on his passion for a woman presently tormented, the woman was doing very badly, he began to vampirize her physical body. He found her to be a new instrument of sensation by seeing through her eyes, hearing through her ears, often speaking through her mouth, and vitalizing himself with ordinary food she ingests. So is that like weird or what, right? But again, it goes back to one important principle that we learn in spiritism, which is as we pass away, we continue to be exactly who we are. So if we are deeply attached to the sensations and to this type of life, if this type of life means everything to us, nothing's going to change just because now we don't have a physical body, because everything pertains to the realm of the mind. So if in your mind you don't even know about spiritual life and all you know is about this material life, you're going to continue to crave for those sensations and for what you know to be. And so this spirit was attached to the woman. He was feeling through her, and that was very harmful to her. She wasn't doing very well. So what she does, she goes to the spiritual center, very common, says, look, I'm being obsessed. She kind of had an idea. And they do a work at the spiritual center, and the good spirits take Liborio away. And that should be the end, right? With the exception that she misses him. And so during the sleep outside of the body, she goes look for him. He was taken away, and now he's tormented by her. Okay? Which brings an important point that we're going to emphasize at the end, which the treatment is obsession is the treatment of the person who is being obsessed and not the spirit per se. Okay? But we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Now, in the book Liberation, just recently out by ADCA of America, we have the case of these young girls with what's called mental parasitism with organic consequences. So let's see. In the description of Andrea Lewis, he talks about magnetic fluid, which is energy, which is poured onto the mental field of the patient. So this is the process that's happening. So the spirits are actively poisoning the mental field of that girl. The aura, so it's like if I hug her, the spirits embrace with their energy, her energy, so they kind of get together. And in this way, the spirits actually have access many times to the areas of our brain And in that way, our memory, our perceptions can be completely altered, okay? Again, this is a very deep study. If you want to read the book, it's there in details. I just want to give a little idea so it doesn't sound like, you know, something like so miraculous or weird. So the case is this: the sick girl laughed without purpose, speaking about revenge projects and fully unconscious and in a state of mental imbalance. Light threads of energy link her brain to the brain of the two entities that control her as magnetizers. The poor girl was saturated with energies that did not belong to her. She passed by many psychiatric hospitals without results. So these spirits were connected to her brain and were influencing her brain directly, okay? Energizing, altering her senses, right? What's the story behind this? This girl, who looks such a victim in this present life, was being obsessed by two spirits who were in a previous life her husband and the husband's brother. And she directly influenced the husband brothers into addiction. He ended up crazy, insane, and the husband ended up committing suicide. So now they are enraged and hate her and are trying to destabilize her in this present life. This is in The Greater World, in this book by Andrew Lewis too. It's the case of a boy that's incarcerated in his sick body. It's a case of fluid infection. So it talks about the creation of mental forms. So the spirits can create certain forms, and these forms can be posed on another brain, okay? And that's going to establish what they call a nervous war or altered psychic state and lead to organic illness as well. But what's the case here? He has been paralyzed since his rebirth 8 years ago. He can't speak, walk, or sit up. He sees very poorly and hears almost nothing on the human plane. And then, you know, further into the description, they're going to say, one of the discarnate's persecutors touched the boy's brain with his right hand. The paralytic's face blanched in a display of enormous anguish. I noticed, that's Andrea Lewis speaking, that through its hands, the hands of the spirit, the unhappy spirit emitted black striae of substance similar to tar, which reached the boy's brain to increasing his feelings of dread. It's nothing different than what we do here in passes. When we put our hands on top of somebody's head, we are manipulating the fluid. The fluid is neutral. Fluids are neutral. Energy is neutral. But you put on the energy your feelings. So when you sit in front of my chair and I ask Jesus to bless you, and I think of, you know, that you may be in struggle, in suffering, or in need of anything, and I really want to help you, and I ask Jesus to help me to help you, what happens is the energy that I am emitting is impregnated by these feelings of love for you. And so it takes the density and the quality of my feeling. So here, the obsessor is also impregnating the fluid with hate, and so the fluid becomes like tar and causes an infection in the thinking of the little boy. Who is this little boy? This little boy was someone who in a previous life had tremendous authority and abuse of this authority, not only to kill many people, but also to take revenge against many other people who had nothing to do with war or anything like that. So he was cruel, and he caused the death of many people. For centuries, he was persecuted by all these who hated him. And he spent many centuries in the lower zone. Right now, he's at the very final stage of his healing. There's only 2 left. From all the ones who persecuted him, most of them have forgiven him, have moved on. There's 2 left. And so these 2 spirits are next to him and are obsessing him in this life that is his last life of suffering. We're going to get back to the case in a little bit. I'm going to skip this one because of the time. And let's get to the healing part. So we're going to go back to each case and we're going to see what's necessary for that picture to change. So in the case of Esther, that's the lady with the family sitting on the table, right? So the spirits will say, until the day that the incarnate, with the strength of their own work in the study of edifying virtues, can offer the discarnate plenty material for reflection. What they're talking about there. Usually the obsessive process ends with our own improvement. As we seek new values, as we seek the edification of virtues to ourselves, the spirit who's next to us is actually being given material for them to think too. And when they see our transformation, many times they're impacted by it. And then that's when they're convinced that we are no longer the same. We have changed, and then they find the strength and the material to change themselves. Most typical case of healing of obsession processes. Many people come to the spiritual center looking for help. We'll tell them, we'll do our part. We'll pray, we'll do everything. Here's what you need to do. But most importantly, it's a work in time. You need to pursue your inner transformation. That's the only way. With the case of Liborio, right? So the guy who was obsessing the lady. As long as their spiritual dispositions are unchanged, Liborio and the wife and the woman, and until they start thinking differently, they will remain in mutual captivity, where obsessor and obsessed feed on each other's emanations. They fear separation due to the crystallized habits they share according to the principles of affinity, and from there arise the obstacles to the dual recovery that we wish for them. The good spirits wish them to change. This is a hard truth for us to digest. A lot of times we ask for change, but we take pleasure on the state that we find ourselves still. And a lot of times it's the same thing. I mean, once Liborio was gone, she missed him. She missed that state of chaos. Sometimes the state of chaos or misery is what actually gives us any sense of being. And if that misery and that distress is taken away from our lives, we don't know what to do. So part of the process of inner transformation is actually bearing these states of disharmony sometimes for a while and investing very seriously into light, into knowledge, and into these virtues, so that little by little there's less and less space for misery in our lives. In the case of the young girl, right, the woman who had the two guys. Now, in obsession cases like this, in which the patient is still able to react, so she was still able of reaction, it is indispensable the resource of resistance. She needs to actively participate and resist the influences. We cannot remove the attached object, which is the two spirits, when the magnet continues to attract it. Okay, so the spirits can the spirits resolve the obsessions for us? They can do many things. They can take the spirits away. They can, for sure. But if we continue to be a magnet attracting, then they're very respectful also of our will and our time. In the case of the incarcerated boy who was paralyzed, the two enemies will return. When nothing else works, then comes the final resource by divine justice. The two enemies will return as brothers of the victim to the heart of a loving woman who has understood with Jesus the value of sacrifice. Together, under the influence of the mother, the enemies will assist the victim and will kiss the brother with renewed love. So, when nothing else works, we are invited in new lives and in new circumstances to meet again with our enemies in different circumstances, so we can learn to love one another. Okay? So what's the take-home message? What do we gather from these? I want to hear from you. If you have to say, okay, what I take home today after all that I hear is this, what would that be? Anyone? Carlos?
Mind your thoughts. Mind your thoughts. Make sure that you try not to think negatively, to try not to attract those negative vibrations.
Good.
Spirits in the lower zones.
For sure. Anyone else?
Well, like the case that, you know, that she was missing, you know, the suffering and the chaos. And I can identify myself with that, because that's what I'm going through. And I understand that sometimes you try not to, go against them. I know that, but it's still, it's something that you missed. So I don't know what the process, what I should do. Or, it's like when you are a drug addicted and you need that, so when you're happy and you got your inner peace and you said, what am I gonna do with this? I'm happy. I've never been happy before.
Right.
So that's what I
love your example, because I think it really it speaks to the issue. I think addiction is a good example.
Yes.
And there are many different ways that we become addicted, right? We are very frail emotionally, so we become addicted to a lot of different things, emotionally speaking. And so the drug, or whatever it is, sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's a situation, brings us this feeling of, again, meaning or aliveness or sensations, right? And so the other key part, what you said, is a process. Yeah. So it is a process.
Yes.
So part of the process is, on one hand, coming, listening, becoming aware, and using external resources that can help you to build a new foundation. So you're going to do your gospel at home. You're going to read. I gave you 5 books to read. Read, understanding. When you're reading, you are projecting. All those thoughts are being projected, and you're also attracting. When you engage in charitable work, when you join a center or you join a volunteer group at your work, then you're going to start creating outside of your life a network of positive things. So you can start feeling different vibrations. Within you, you're going to invest in the acquisition of the virtues that are in ourselves in potential, right? So you're going to develop patience, you're going to develop discipline, you're going to develop perseverance, you're going to develop different type of feelings, because the very essence of all of this, I don't care what it is that we're talking about, is lack of self-love. Bottom line. Okay? So what you do is you need to learn to love yourself. Now, we are very close to the beginning of our evolution. So in the beginning of our evolution, when we are even more primitive than we are right now, pleasure is very closely related to physical sensation. So part of the process is to learn and to discover different types of pleasure. The pleasure of friendship, of true friendship and love, and to nourish. You come here, I'm going to give the center as an example, but it can be anywhere, but you come here and you feel the vibrations and you start working with one another and you feel the commitment and the love, and you start to feel like there is a different type of love. Not like the love that's possessive, but that nourishes you. And then you start to do all kinds of positive works, and then you start feeling happy with that. Oh my God, that's such a wonderful experience. And you will start discovering all the levels of pleasure that don't come anymore from the illusion of pleasure, right? That the world gives us, which is you're thirsty, and you drink still water. It's an illusion that that amount of water can satiate your thirst, because after you drink a couple glasses, you're going to be even more thirsty. And that's what the world does to us. It gives us the illusion, the drugs, the relationships, whatever it is, of satiation, right. But it's an illusion, because at the very end, you are more empty, you're drier, right? So it's a journey. It's a journey that you're going to use of outside resources, and you're going to invest in these virtues. Little by little, you're going to fall many times. You're not going to be able, but the key is to perseverate, to continue on, and to give yourself a chance to discover different types of pleasures. And the thing with those pleasures is that once you experience them, it's very noticeable how fulfilling they are, and how they stay with you, and how they nourish your soul. And then little by little, you're going to start to crave more and more for that. And you're going to have moments where you're still going to want the world, and you're still going to, and then you get tired of it, and you look up to the sky again. And you know, and that's the process. And it's going to come one day that this here is going to be all the way down, never going to go up again, and we're going to be here. But even the pleasures that the higher spirits talk to us about, we don't even know what they are. So, and then there is the fear that the lady experienced without libido. She didn't know what her life would be like, because she has no reference for any other type of love, pleasure, sensation that's not material, that's not physical. Okay? Anyone else? All right, so there are no real victims when it comes to obsession. Okay? It's always an interplay of minds. We are active participants of our relationships in both realms. Everything that I said, if you don't want to apply it to the spirits, you can apply it to your relationships here, because we are talking about relationships in any realm of life. Change requires true will and action. The spirits, not even Jesus Christ, was able to heal anyone who didn't want or who wasn't ready to be healed. It takes an active process and will of the person who is being obsessed. So that's why Jesus would always say, your faith healed you, not me. Your faith is what has healed you. So healing is also always a process of self-healing. And, you know, in response to you, is seek the light to end darkness. A lot of different religions, and even in Spiritism for a long time, and even nowadays, depending on where you go, people take some of the words of Jesus literally. So you say, okay, so if your hand is a reason of scandal, cut it off, right? Or take your eyes off, right? And what we know nowadays is that you don't change yourself by cutting parts of yourself. You can do that. That would be an act of lack of love. What we do is we embrace who we are. Better say, we embrace where we are in our level of evolution. And we tell to ourselves, if I'm still acting this way, if I'm still craving this, is because behind it, there is a reason, an emotional reason. So instead of crucifying yourself, give yourself a big hug and accept who you are, understanding that whatever darkness you experience is transient. But then make sure that you're actively seeking the light. You're actively seeking the transformation process. So the miracle of transformation is not by trimming parts of ourselves, but it's by reinforcing and expanding the light. We all have this focus of light within ourselves that's God in us. And the process of inner transformation is this. You nourish the light, more light, more light, more light, in such a way that it will come a day there will be no place for darkness. And so you didn't need to cut yourself. You didn't need to punish yourself. All you need to do is to love yourself. Okay? So with that, we come to an end.